This week on the podcast, when does a small business become a big business? I'm not sure we can even agree on this one. Welcome to the Profit Cash Growth Podcast. This is the podcast for 6 and 7 figure business owners who are looking to grow a financially successful business. My co-host, Claire Hancott, is a finance director, chartered accountant and entrepreneur. And every week, I'll be exploring guidance and frameworks designed to help you increase your profits, improve your cash flow and grow your business. So podcasting is really hard, isn't it, Claire?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
actually.
It's really, really hard. And I think we should give ourselves a little round of applause because obviously we saw this week somebody who'd had to ditch their podcast after a handful of episodes or something. And obviously explained just how hard they found doing it week in, week out and all the rest of it. Granted, they also had guests and things. So I think that just makes it extra hard. And also the reason why we don't do a video podcast, isn't it? Because I always say to you, we make this difficult, it just wouldn't happen every week.
Yeah,
But
it would be too much for us.
It is hard, isn't it?
We do this at the weekends generally, don't we?
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll fit it in during the week,
bear
but
in mind,
otherwise...
we're running lots of businesses as well as doing this. I think, people forget just how challenging it is to constantly churn out content every single week, isn't it?
I think the difference with us is that these are the types of conversations that when we
have anyway.
We have anyway. So we were sitting having breakfast this morning and we were talking about some of the points in this podcast, and when we're in the car and we always say, oh, we should just record this and this could be the podcast. But it does still take a lot of prep. We probably put about an hour of preparation into each.
Yeah. Because if you don't put it into a structure, it just ends up a mess, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We've done that before where we've rushed into it and you're that was a mess and we've had to record it again.
You just wing it.
Yeah, it doesn't work. You really have to structure it for
So
listeners
it's about an hour's proper structure of writing down what we're going to talk about and when and who's going to say which bit. But then there's also hours around that, researching, reading, just, opening your mind to different things that are in the news that have been talked about in the industry at the moment so that we're topical and we've got ideas flowing through, and then that's before we've even got through to the editing.
Yeah,
putting it live, dealing with inquiries
for them, dealing with inquiries. Yeah, there's absolutely tons involved in it.
And
but
then,
we've got it down to a pretty. I always think it's quite efficient because I think it's probably about 4 hours an episode. I think from start to finish, and I feel like that's feels like quite a good value.
Yeah,
but it's because we've used tools to make that super efficient. If we weren't really techie and really into the right tools and the AI and everything else, I reckon that's a double that at least, probably 10 or 15 hour job. You could get lost in it. I can imagine people getting really lost in podcasting and losing their week.
So look, a few people have said to me over the last couple of weeks actually, oh, I really wish that you'd do a video podcast because I watch it on YouTube and it's just a static screen. But it's that is the reason why, because I don't think that we would commit to it every week.
Yeah, somebody once said, a mentor once said to me, and I thought, and it's really stuck with me with everything we've done in our businesses, they've said that if anything that you need to do if you know that consistency is the important part of the outcome of what you're doing, which podcasting is absolutely about consistency over a very, very, very long term. They say that your podcast only really takes off after year 3 to 5, don't they? And even, the big guys, Stephen Bartlett and whatever, even they said the same thing. No listeners for 3 years. And I think the second that something becomes a chore, it becomes difficult to do consistently. So absolutely better to do something that is halfway there, but is not a chore that you can do really consistently than trying to make it perfect and it become a chore. So, and it's the same, I treat the gym the same, don't I, Claire?
Yeah,
when you watch my gym sessions, you're that's what he's thinking. He's thinking, I don't want it to be might as well have not even gone. I don't want it to be a chore. Anyway, so I don't know. I'm not asking for mass appreciation for the content we put out week in, week out, but it did make me think that we've got into a groove of doing this that I don't think it feels too much like a chore. I mean, sometimes it's a bit of a pain.
Well, look, it's Easter bank holiday weekend, and here we are in the office. The car park's empty, everyone's eating Easter eggs, and here we are in the office. So it is a chore for sure sometimes, but
a chore for sure.
We enjoy it and we appreciate the feedback that we get. So if you're listening to this, please just give us a little thumbs up so that we know you appreciate it, because it just helps us.
Send Claire a LinkedIn message just to say, look, I actually appreciate the fact you gave up your bank holiday weekend to make sure that you gave us that dross content that you're about to do.
The utter drivel.
Talking of utter drivel, today is so exciting because we're going to do a battle off. We haven't done a battle off for about a year and a half, have we? And we're going to do a battle off between small versus big business. Or when does a small business become a big business? The reason we wanted to do this is
hang on,
because this is the conversation we have in the car all the time, isn't
Don't go into a deep dive. We've got a whole story around this. Have you missed the news story of the week, Simon?
All right.
Come on. This is the utter dross that you're turning out. Pay attention.
All right.
What's in this week's news story of the week?
News story of the week. So this week, Claire, system malfunction causes more than 100 driverless taxis to stop mid-traffic in China. This was your story. You going to tell us about it? Oh, hello.
So all of the driverless taxis malfunctioned at the same time in China. I just thought this was fascinating. It was actually in Wuhan, and I joked that if the taxis got like the equivalent of COVID, because that was the source of COVID, wasn't it? It was Wuhan in China. But yeah, that was a bit of a rubbish joke. But look, I just found it really fascinating that all the driverless taxis stopped at the same time. They displayed a message on the screen to the passengers, and it said that stay put, somebody will be with you in 5 minutes. And I can remember thinking, do they really mean 5 minutes? Like, I wonder if they did turn up in 5 minutes. How would they get to somebody within 5 minutes? And who's coming? That's the other thing. I just found the whole thing quite fascinating. It just made me think, imagine if that in fast forward like 20, 25 years time, potentially the majority of vehicles on UK roads could be driverless.
Yeah.
What we're going to do if that happens?
This is like a view into the future, isn't it? It's like, but then, like, honestly, they make a big drama out of this. But like, when we're in our driver cars and we sit in stationary traffic around the M25 for an hour, like I used to when I used to travel into London, like we don't think anything of that. But like when a driverless load of cars stop, it's like a big deal.
But they just stopped. So they did say that the majority of passengers that were in like town centre locations and stuff, they just got out and took to foot, got on different forms of transport. But there were some people that were literally on highways and they're stopped in the middle of the highway and there's traffic streaming past them on either side, beeping their horns and stuff. So it's very dangerous.
You say that, but you don't get these news reports when you're quite often on a train and it just stops and you're stuck there on a train for ages. We don't get these reports. Oh, train stopped because of something on the line.
Look,
you were stuck there for 25. I know, because it's new.
Just a bit of fun.
New.
It's just a bit fascinating, isn't it?
No.
And the fact that it's in Wuhan, I think that was what really got me.
I don't know why that's so relevant, but okay. You're just obsessed with the fact that you think COVID came out of there.
I don't think COVID came out of there. COVID did come out of there.
Well, has it actually been proven? Who knows?
For God's sake.
Who knows?
All right, Donald.
Donald Duck?
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
Yeah, great. Interesting story. Let's move on to this week's battle off.
I've never heard somebody say interesting story with less sincerity than what you just said there.
I know.
You don't find it very interesting. Right. So this week's battle off, we want to define what the difference between a small and a big business is and when you cross the line. And this came about because we went out for dinner the other week and we were sitting in a restaurant in Woburn called Lussman's, and on their menu they proudly said, I think it was 6 locations that they had. And I could remember turning to you and I said, is this now a big business? At what point is this not a small business anymore? And I think it's very topical at the moment because there's this big, there's definitely been a movement over the last probably like 10 to 15 years of, anti-corporate, anti-big business, support small business. And it's just that fine line, isn't it, between when is something not a big business and when is something a small business and should get our support and when's it a big business and we should hate it.
Yeah. And you kind of, I think why there really is two sides to this argument, because if you take the really hard-nosed capital view, which is the position you're going to adopt in this battle off, your position would be that a small business that is constantly being subsidised by the state is potentially taking the space of what a big business could be doing really efficiently.
Well, you've just jumped right to the conclusion of the podcast, haven't you? So
No. And vice versa, I'm taking the socialist view on this one, which is small business is really good. We should be subsidising them and we should be having those small businesses on our streets, even if they have no intention of growing.
Yeah. And I think it also is quite apt at the moment because it's what support do businesses need? When we say a small business, small businesses need more support. What does that mean? Who needs the support? Who is more deserving of the support? And how do we get, as taxpayers, if we are going to give government support to businesses, how do we make sure that we get the best bang for our buck and that actually delivers a return?
How do they work through the facts? I'm a massive, massive supporter of it's the same as regressive taxation, so to speak, isn't it? It should be the same with businesses. And to a degree it is. I'm a massive supporter of having started all of our businesses from zero. None of them we acquired or bought that were running. That the time when I needed your help the most, i.e. the government or whoever that is through that early growth stage. I needed as much support as I can. In fact, I would like to not had any taxes or anything like that up to like £500,000 or something. And then I can start to give back, so to speak. And I think the difference is like that works really well when a business has its intention of growing through that stage and out the other end of it. And I think your point is that we have far too many businesses who just stay in that stage and have no intention of getting out of it. And therefore, what would the difference look like if that space was taken differently? Is that where you're at?
So let's start by defining what is a small business. Let's see if we can come to a consensus as to what makes a small business a small business.
Okay. Are we doing this through the 4 rounds or something different? This is what happens when we really badly script it, you see.
Well, I thought this was the whole point of the podcast. Let's start by defining what's a small business.
Okay.
And then
how do we define that? That we define it through the 4 rounds?
Well, the things that we've written down here, Simon: turnover, headcount, location, external funding. The standard definitions, are they all flawed?
These are the 4
notes that are right in front of your eyeballs.
These are the 4 rounds that we're going to go through, though. We're going to go through these and we're going to battle them out in each of them: metrics, reality, the subsidy argument, the founder dependency, lifestyle versus scalability. So each of those will determine who wins, whether it's a small business or a large business in each of the rounds. So that's how we're going to do that. So shall we start with round 1 then? So round 1 is, do you define small business, or how do you define a small business using metrics or reality? So, for example, my opinion would be a small business is a business that turns over less than £500,000.
Oh, no.
No?
No, because then we've got businesses that wouldn't be small businesses, which is just stupid. I wouldn't say that any of our businesses are big businesses or even medium-sized businesses.
But I think once a business my argument would be, once a business gets above £500,000 of turnover, I think it can afford to stand on its own 2 feet, and it doesn't need the subsidies. Because if you think about the worst case scenario of profit, and at that size, they're probably making a bigger percentage than this. Let's say you're making 10%. That means the owner's making a £50,000 salary. Well, that's above average wage. So they're now out of average lifestyle and into affluence, so to speak, aren't they?
See, this is where I have a completely different view of this. And I think this is probably because of the work that I do. I generally don't look at accounts of businesses less than 500k. It's not our ballpark at all. And generally would say less than $1 million is kind of the sweet spot of where most of our customers start from.
Yeah.
And most of our customers that are turning over around $1 million, up to sort of maybe 1.5 to 2 million, they need those subsidies. They can't lose small business rates relief. They can't lose the employment allowance because they just don't make any profit.
But if you're turning over $1 million, you're making £100 to £200,000 profit, aren't you? You're making between 10 and 20% probably. You're probably at the higher end, because big businesses are making the small margin like 10%. As you're a small business, you tend to make a higher net profit, don't you?
No.
Don't you?
No, not at all.
Why?
Because when you're a small business under 500k, you tend to not have any layers of management in your business. So you, as the MD, you generally hire people that are what we would say like fee earners, or like they have a direct contribution to output in your business. Whereas as soon as you start to go up the ranks, like we've just seen in my business, we hire an FD called Chris, who sits in the office, and a big part of his job is operational, and it's about managing the team and development and performance and all those types of things. And all of that is just an overhead in my business. And I'm at that point now where I've got layers of management in my business. We've got them in all of our businesses now, a layer of management where somebody's job is to just sit there and do stuff that doesn't actually earn the business any money, but helps you be a better business long term. And it's that stuff that once a business gets over about 500k turnover, they start getting those layers of management and that cost, and therefore their profit drops. So I would actually argue that I think that a micro business, I would generally say a business is a micro business if it's less than 500k. And I would say that a business of somewhere between 5 to 10 million for me would be the sweet spot of what I would say jumps into becoming a medium business, 5 to 10 million turnover.
Oh, interesting.
Way bigger than what you're talking about.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'd say that the trigger that you've just described for me is the trigger when a business goes from being a small business to being a small to medium enterprise, which is the point where I think any business that can afford to put a 6-figure management team in place is no longer a small business, in my view, just because I don't think anybody would describe themselves as a small business who has a 6-figure person running it that's not themselves.
But I just think it also depends on why you're doing it. So, for example, we've got that 6-figure person in each of our businesses. We were actually talking about this the other week. So we have like a general manager, MD kind of position in all of our businesses now, but we've only got that position because we've got multiple businesses and we can't be that person across all of them. But if we just had one business, we would be that person. So then you would say all of a sudden that wasn't a small business.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So I think you've got to think much bigger. And I think for me, a small business is 5 to 10 million turnover.
Okay.
And then it becomes medium.
Okay. Fine. So that's a tie break in round 1. Round 2, the subsidy argument. So small businesses need support because they've got cash flow pressure, they've got no buying power because they're not big enough, they're much more vulnerable to shocks. This is why I think they need much more support. And without the support, I think they just die. They also, the other thing that's key that's missing is they don't have the education. A lot of them, are on that journey. So they're ill-educated. They don't have the capital. They have that cash flow pressure. So I think they need that subsidy to get through that piece.
Now, this is where I'm probably going to say something a bit controversial.
Shock horror.
And within myself, I feel conflicted about what I'm going to say. So I'm saying this as more of a discussion point rather than my opinion. And the question would be is, as taxpayers, where is that level that we have to say we cannot continue to throw more and more money into these tiny businesses? So let me just paint a scenario of a high street coffee shop, turns over, they'd be lucky to get to 6-figure turnover. So they're not VAT registered, they're not paying VAT.
They really are tiny then.
They've got a couple of part-time workers at the weekend. So, they're getting full employment allowance. They're not contributing anything towards national insurance contributions. They're getting small business rates relief. So they're not contributing business rates to the local economy either. And the business owner is self-employed and therefore statistically will pay less tax than if they had a salary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what we've actually got is somebody taking up a space on the high street that is not contributing to the economy. And that unit, that building could be taken by a bigger business like a Greggs, like a Subway, that would be paying corporation tax, employers' national insurance, business rates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And therefore, is that good investment for a taxpayer? Is that good use of taxpayers' money? Now, absolutely, when people get started, they need that support without a shadow of a doubt. But at what point should it be expected that you are capable of standing on your own 2 feet and supporting your own business? And actually, there is a shit ton of help out there for these micro businesses. The banks, the government, they all do these small business schemes. The local council, Central Bedfordshire Council, you can get these business mentors. They talk to you about, what you need to be looking at in your accounts, how to make your business more profitable, how to do marketing. There is so much free help and support aimed at these micro businesses that there is an element of, there isn't an excuse for them staying small.
Okay, so a couple of things that I would ask about that is, what exactly are we talking about in terms of subsidies? Because you mentioned things like Greggs could go in there and pay business rates, but they wouldn't, because the business rates are based on the rentable value of the property. So why would that differ with a small business versus Greggs?
Because when you've got one location, you're entitled to small business rates relief. When you've got more, you're not.
Okay. So what about the fact that not everybody wants to build a big business or build an empire? They want to build a business that works around them and their life in the same way that people want to have a job that works around them and their life. You can see at the moment, like most people now want to have a couple of days at home working. They want to have a few days in the office working. And that's the environment that we produce. So why should that be any different for the small business owner that wants to open their coffee shop on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday and stay at home on a Tuesday, Thursday and have the choice to run a business the way that they want to run it, not the way that consumers expect them to run it? Because
their lifestyle has been funded by other taxpayers.
Granted, but that's the same difference as somebody who works part-time at home and then takes benefits.
So also, which should not be allowed, in my opinion. I think there's a certain amount of time, isn't there? There's I think as a country, well, certainly myself as a taxpayer, I'm willing to support people that need a leg up. But the idea is that we give you a leg up now with the aim of you taking full responsibility for yourself at some point in the near future.
Right,
and sometimes
Margaret.
that's what I believe is that, people need support when they're at the bottom to get those first few rungs of the ladder done, and then you should keep on climbing up. How high up you go is a personal opinion, but I think that your aim should always be to become self-sufficient.
But that means that one of your favourite lunch spots, the MK Cafe, where you get your jacket potato, which is clearly a small charitable cafe which serves fantastic lunch for you. It's one of your favourite lunch spots. Wouldn't exist. It would be just another mass chain with dog shit ingredients because they buy them as cheap as possible.
But what I'm saying, what I'm
no
not saying
thought or
is
care
it
about it.
shouldn't exist. What I'm saying is that it should get to a point where it's self-sustainable. And if it wants to go on and become a chain and set up other locations and stuff, then excellent. Let's put some support in to enable people to do that next run of the ladder, when they do want to scale and go up. But at the moment, all of the subsidies seem to be aimed at helping people stay small.
So I would
There's no
argue
incentive.
That
we see this time and time again with people not wanting to become VAT registered.
Yeah. I would argue that in order for them to get moving and get out of that gap, they need more subsidy, not less than they currently get.
Yeah, and we have this cliff edge of subsidies where all of the subsidies are aimed at keeping people small. And I totally understand the issue is part of a system. The system is broken. As much as there are some people that sit in the system taking advantage of it, the system itself is also broken. We have this cliff edge of support in the UK where pretty much everything drops off at the same time. Small business rates relief, your corporation tax rate goes up. Like all these things kick in at the same time. And that becomes very difficult, therefore, to break out of this cycle and not become a micro business and become a business that is scaling and wants to get bigger and open multiple locations or open another office or employ more people. Yeah. It's very, very difficult.
Okay, tie break. I think
anyone's winning. Put my argument
one.
Across very well.
I thought your argument was good, but I also think it's not necessarily a winning argument. I think people would see both sides of that argument. I think people value their community and they value having that community-led thing, not another faceless Greggs or Subway on their high street. So I think there's a difficult argument there. I think the subsidy is there is a value in the subsidy and keeping proper businesses on the high street, not just chains. Just getting a mix. The problem is if you go down your route, there wouldn't be a mix any longer. It'd just be one. It'd be one size fits all, which is large corporations.
Wouldn't it be interesting though? Is if you started a business, if you had to have like a business owner license, that meant that you had to have like mandatory entrepreneurial training and you had to be able to prove that you could develop a profitable business model and you can market your business and you can manage your finances. Wouldn't that be better use of government money?
It would be better to educate people better so that the success percentage is higher. But the reality is that what you're saying is like none of these other people, Greggs, whoever else you mentioned, I don't know why I keep mentioning it's like a bloody advert for Greggs. Whoever it was, Sainsbury's, like they all started from the same place. Now they just happen to be the 1% that broke through. 99 of them fail. And those stats haven't changed in a lifetime of history. That is just how humans work. It's not now, I think your point is that we could improve that percentage by focusing on things that really matter, which is education. It's definitely education. We see it time and time again on TV, things like the hotel inspector or whatever else, where we just watch and it's always the same response, which is, guess what? I was a nurse yesterday. I decided to start. I just thought I'd buy this hotel tomorrow. No education, no thought about it, no investment in themselves and their thought. And then they're wondering why they put 6 figures into it and they're not making a profit. So I definitely agree with that point that there's definitely more we can put into education than simply giving people money to prop it up. But I think you just know that one's really easy to deploy and one's really hard to deploy. So we take the route of least resistance, don't we, by just bunging them money and subsidies because it's easy. It's like same as we did in COVID, isn't it? Easy to give people money. Right, check. Round 3 then. Founder dependency. Does this matter? Does this make a difference in whether a business is small or large? So
no, I think the only thing this gives you an indication of is whether the business is likely to remain small or not.
Okay, expand.
Well, you've got YouMove. What was YouMove's turnover last year?
I don't know, 500,000.
And it runs entirely without you. So you're now saying that's a big business?
No, I'm not saying that's the case because I've not said that's the case.
So you actually wrote down that if the founder stops and the business stops, then it's a small business. If the business can run without the founder, then it's a big business. But by your very own argument there, like we are building every single one of our businesses to entirely run without us. We've done that from the very start. And I just think that's a signal of a well-run business.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a small business anymore. I'd say it's come out of that. Going back to the starting point, I'm like, it's at a point where it's got like 5-6 people employed. Like this is like in the top 1% of businesses in the UK now. Like it's not a small business. Like only what does like 1% of companies like even employ people in the UK or something?
No.
It's tiny, isn't it? It's a tiny percentage of companies that actually even employ somebody. I think 90% don't even meet the VAT threshold or something. Like this is what we're talking about. It's like actually it doesn't take much to to not be a small business anymore.
But I think what you're confusing there is the age of the business with the size of the business. Like you can have a 10, 20-year-old business that, YouMove, because we're not really heavily investing in YouMove anymore. It is what it is. It's an estate agency, and the only way to really grow that is to grow demographically, which we're not interested in doing.
Geographically.
Geographically.
Demographically. We're going to go for the youngsters next.
Well, that's what we are doing now, isn't it? But we're not going to grow it geographically. Therefore, it's not going to grow much beyond what it is. Mm-hmm. So therefore, it's going to continue to mature. That doesn't make it a bigger business. That just makes it a more mature business.
Yeah. True.
So I think you're conflating size with maturity.
Okay. So what are we saying is the indication with founder as to whether it's a small or big business?
Owner dependency, I think, has no bearing whatsoever on whether something is small or large.
Okay. What about round 4, which is a lifestyle business versus a scalable business? Not everyone wants to scale their business. And this is the thing with YouMove with my business there. I wanted to scale businesses and do that because that's what I enjoyed doing. And my business partner's like, I don't want that. I just want a salary, and I want something that I just go and do every day.
But when you started out in your first year, you turned over 100 grand. You weren't a big business just because you had ambition to be a big business. I think loads of people have got ambition to be a big business, but it doesn't mean they ever get there.
No.
So again, I don't think ambition is necessarily a factor. I think, you can definitely say that you're never going to become a big business if you don't have the ambition to be it.
So you're saying at some point, if you've got the ambition to be a big business, but you're just not achieving it, that you should just give up? There should be a line in the sand where somebody comes and pulls the plug on you and says, you can't do this anymore.
No. I think that, no, not at all. I think there's particularly a lot of...
So if I grow a business, I really want, I guess everyone goes, I want £1 million business, and they go into it and they can't get it above 100 grand and they just hit a ceiling. What's that? Where do you put that business in your head?
What, they can't get above 100 grand?
Yeah. They're now in they got to 100 grand in 18 months and they're still at 100 grand in year 5. Get rid of them. They need to be Greg's in, them out.
No, I think it's the reason why they're not breaking through that. Is it that they've just got a flawed business model? And then I think if they're not prepared to change their business model, then yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that the subsidies should continue to be given to them, as in the tax breaks that they get.
What about they're just busy, so can't take on any more anyway? They've got enough that they want to do. They don't want to recruit people.
Look, I think this comes back to number 2, isn't it? About the subsidy argument. It's it's such a complex discussion. And I don't think that I'm pro or against giving subsidies to small businesses. I can see the arguments either way as to, you said about keeping a high street alive, keeping independent businesses there. We don't want them owned by all these chains that are like cookie cutter, and you go to every high street in the UK and it looks the same. There's all these arguments. They bring community, hang on, different diversity of people.
This is the shittest battle off ever.
But
what's happened to you? I've won you over.
No, I said at the very start that even I don't know where I sit with this, because I think it's a very complicated argument. So no, I don't think that just because somebody's struggling to do it means that they should be cut down.
All right. Do we have a summarisation of this conversation? Because this seems like a right old mess. I
think the only other one that we haven't talked about is whether they're still privately owned or not.
Yes, you did have a point around that, didn't you? What was your point?
Oh, well, I used to work for a company called Sonopar, 25 billion turnover, and privately owned by family. Shares have never been sold publicly.
And I said the same thing about Virgin and Richard Branson. There's a massive private. Well, there's loads of private. Walmart, isn't that still privately owned?
Well, that's the thing. I think a lot of people will say, oh, when a business has got
James Dyson.
When a business becomes publicly listed, or even PE backing, when it's got private equity backing, that's potentially another thing. But I know a lot of tiny, tiny businesses that have got private equity backing and they don't necessarily ever do anything.
I don't think it bears, personally, I don't think this bears any resemblance on defining whether a business is small or not. You can't say that Dyson's a small business just because he's privately owned, because it's not, is it? So that, I think this particular metric doesn't really work in the argument for small or big business.
So look, what are we saying is a small business? Is that restaurant that we sat in Woburn with 6 chains, is that
6 restaurants?
6 restaurants. Is that a small independent business, or is that now a big business that is not worthy of our support anymore? And we should be saying support small businesses, stay local.
I think it's out small business, and it can stand on its own 2 feet. Each one of those restaurants has got probably 30 staff in it. They've probably got well over 100 staff. That is not the definition of a small business, in my view. I don't think so. And I reckon their turnover is pretty high. It's a very, very high-end restaurant. They probably are turning over anything up to £1 million a location, probably. It's probably a £5 million business then. I think it doesn't need subsidising. Not at that stage.
Oh, you don't think they should get employment allowance?
I think everyone gets employment allowance.
But should they? I bet that business makes hardly any money.
Yeah, that's just because it's in hospitality and the government's screwing them because of VAT and everything else and business rates and blah, blah, blah. So that's not, to be honest, the employment allowance doesn't help them. Business rates and VAT help them. Business rates and VAT take probably 40% off their turnover straight away.
Well, they won't get business rate relief. So they've got multiple locations.
No, that's what I mean. But the fact they have to pay business rates and the fact that they have to pay employers' national insurance and a high minimum wage and VAT. 50% of their stuff's gone just on government. The government's their biggest employer.
So, is that a small business or not?
No, it's not a small business, but it's a business that is being deliberately driven out by government policy.
Okay. Now, I think that you stop being a small business when your turnover gets to 10 million.
Okay. That's wild, isn't it?
I don't think it is.
What percentage?
I think most of my customers would describe themselves as small business owner.
Right.
In fact, all of my customers would say I'm a small business owner.
Yeah, it's a weird definition. What percentage of businesses in the UK turn over more than £10 million?
1%.
What do you think? I just think it's, 1%. That's crazy.
But doesn't that just show how hard it is to become a medium business and let alone go on to become a big business? So
you're saying only 1% of UK businesses can be classed as not a small business?
Yeah.
Then the brackets are not set properly, are they? Like there's no blend, like it's impossible to get. So you're telling me you've got to get your business to 99% before you are no longer a small business. That just feels like an impossible ambition. Where's the stepping stone? I feel like I'm making progress. Like it just feels like such a cliff edge.
Micro businesses up to 500k. Okay, well then let's drop it and let's say up to 5 million. So up to 500k, you're a micro business. Up to 5 million, you're a small business.
95% do under $1 million. Does that change your view?
No. Because I already knew that statistic. So up to 500k, you're a micro. This is my opinion. Up to 500, you're a micro. Up to 5 million, you're a small business. And then I would probably say around about 20 million, you stop being a small business and you become a big business.
Okay.
Sorry, you stop being a medium business and you become a big business. And then over 100k, you're corporate. 100 million, you're corporate. What are you typing away on ChatGPT here?
I'm just trying to see what their view is because they come back and said like 10 million is not small statistically. You can't just find that. So I'm just asking what it thinks is small. So, okay, they've said 1 million still small, 5 million growing, 10 million no longer small. Okay. Well, there you go. That was...
So look, please do get in touch. Tell us if you think that you are a small business owner, what your turnover is, and or what you think a definition of a small business should be. It should be really fascinating to know.
Yeah. How do we get in touch with you? On your LinkedIn?
Claire, on my LinkedIn
Claire Hancott, or marketing.
Drop me an email.
marketing@profitcashgrowth.com. Let us know.
What's the PCG extra for this week, Simon?
I don't know. Let's find out. So this week, my Profit Cash Growth Extra has to be a tour of the Bremont Watch Factory in Henley-on-Thames. Why are we saying this?
Brilliant.
Because we did it this week, didn't we? We were very thankful to be invited by Rob Pickering to a gathering there where he put on a tour of the factory. I learned so much about watches because, as I explained to the lady at the beginning when we all discussed our watches, I'm not a watch wearer. The last time I wore a watch is still the same one that I have in my loft now, which is the Casio James Bond watch, which plays the James Bond theme when you play it. I'm hoping it's going to go up in value because it's
what age
from
did
the
you get
90s,
that watch?
or about 12.
There we go, just to put some context on it.
I'm genuinely thinking, do you know, when I came away with that, I thought I might put a battery in there, start wearing that. I bet it's like back in, like cool, isn't it? Anyway,
literally, if you do that, our marriage is dead.
Yeah,
like,
get her.
There is.
So go and have a look. Fantastic British watch brand, only 25 years old, just growing and growing and growing. What I loved about it is they've done some amazing limited edition watches. A couple of my favourites were the Code Breaker, which is they did 250 versions of a watch that had a piece of the Bletchley Park Code Breaker machine, the Enigma machine, into the back of it. They did one for the Wright brothers, the first airplane flight, where there's a piece of the wing in the back of each of the watches. They did a Concorde one, piece of Concorde. They did a Stephen Hawking watch with a piece of meteorite in the back of it. So all these fantastic limited edition runs.
Look, this is like
fantastic.
A masterclass in how you can break through in a
niche,
marketplace. You know,
niche.
the only watchmaker in the UK, and they've gone with these limited editions, which really are just like absolutely fascinating to read the story behind. And, you know, a 25-year-old business that has now linked itself to this sort of heritage, and it's just absolutely
fascinating.
The
storytelling was unbelievable. Great. Well, thanks for joining us for another week's podcast. As always, if you feel like you might have outgrown your current account, you would like to work with Claire and the team at Profit Cash Growth, the accountants for 7-figure businesses, fractional FD services,
not small
and
businesses.
financial control. Definitely not a small business. No, you are a small business if you're up to 10 million apparently, and you could potentially be one of Claire's clients. Definitely do get in touch on the website. You can book a discovery call to have a chat with Claire and the team. As always, please rate, review and subscribe to the podcast and share this episode, this rambly, messed up, really bad example of an episode that we did, with anybody and everybody you can, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you.